All right, friends, we're going to switch gears a bit here. It is my pleasure to introduce Shannon T. Remick. Shannon is a psychiatrist at the VA in Loma Linda, and this session is really going to focus on the current research that's being conducted within the VA, which ironically is a very innovative space, and there's some exciting work going on. So please join me in welcoming Shannon to the stage.
So I'm Shannon Remick. I work as a psychiatrist. In my day job at the VA in Loma Linda, California, which is in Southern California. And I'm here to talk about a broad overview of what's going on. I mean, it's not an exhaustive talk, but some of you might be happy to hear, maybe unhappy that I'm not going to talk about numbers or data because we don't have that yet. A lot of this is either currently ongoing or will be starting soon. And before I say anything else, disclaimer, I am here on my time as a private citizen, and the opinions and thoughts I share are my own and not reflective of the government or the VA. I only have 2 slides. I'm gonna give myself a couple minutes to get on my soapbox, and then I have 5 minutes about per slide. So I'm going to talk about the why first and then the what, because I think the why is pretty important. Because if you don't really care about the government or veterans' health care, that's fair. But I still think this is relevant because we're contributing to the body of knowledge when it comes to psychedelic research. And then I just got to talk about why I work with veterans, period. So up on my soapbox. Man, what an intro, and then I forgot how to, okay. Just going to start with just putting yourself in my shoes, perhaps other researchers' shoes, and perhaps other people who work for the VA, our shoes. And someone yesterday was talking about responsibility. And working in healthcare, working as even a facilitator, comes with responsibility. And I take that responsibility very seriously. So waking up in the morning, you've got baseline responsibility, someone else's safety. So competence, putting in the work to be competent, being present with the people that you're working with. That's a level of pressure. Then you work for the VA, you work for the government. So Uncle Sam's peeking over your shoulder a lot. It's a lot of pressure. Then you've got a research study going that's psychedelic oriented, or maybe it's MDMA. So the psychedelic community is wondering what you're up to. Are you going to keep the spirit of those who came before you? How are you going to do this in the government? So all that pressure, sometimes there's a little voice maybe in the back of your head that says, don't fuck it up, right? So I think Dr. Christopher, who talked earlier, he's with the Portland VA, he mentioned, walking a little bit of a tightrope of multiple different worlds. It can get very interesting. And working with veterans. So why working with veterans? Number one, they're a subgroup of the population. They have different exposures and physical exposures. Nuclear propulsion, asbestos apparently is everywhere, munitions. I do a lot of Googling to keep up with what's going on. And then exposures psychologically, which I think we're all at least somewhat aware of. I don't think it's an overstatement to call some of these exposures atrocities. And just like us, the multitude of experiences that have brought us here today can't be really quantified, but we're all human beings, and I think I imagine a lot of us have the foundation that humans are deserving of care, deserving of healing and safety. And there's been a lot of talk of responsibility, community, and the thread of community. And I've got to say it, that veterans do embody self-sacrifice, discipline, duty, a bigger whole, that I think is pretty cool. And I don't see anywhere else. And talking about community, I am very honored to be welcomed and work in such a community that can be, kind of intense, but they do intense things. And our nation's warriors, it's very rare that you meet someone, and I've met a lot of veterans, and I know a lot of veterans who either have or would lay down their life for another person. Okay, so that's the why. And then I'm gonna get to the slide. Okay. So this is the easy part because there's pictures. So I'm going to go through the left side, work my way down, and then the right side of the column, and work my way down of what research is being conducted right now. And the words might be a little bit small, but I'm a talker, so you can just listen. So the first one, I guess I cheated. I included myself and my co-investigator who's here with us today, Dr. Ali Cagle. It would not have happened without her and without a team, without other people. This study was the first to be proposed and the first to get going within the VA, apparently. That gives a little bit of a dopamine hit, I guess, just to be the first, which I think is totally not necessary because I don't want to be the last. And honestly, the study, I can say it, I guess, because I'm the lead, but it's a little bit boring, you know? We were the first, so it's about safety. It's open label, meaning the veterans are getting MDMA, and it's treatment refractory, combat-related PTSD. So they had to have already tried standard treatment, and it has to be combat trauma for that specific study. And then here in Portland, at the Portland VA, we've got Dr. Stauffer, who spoke earlier. He's got 2 studies, which I'm very excited to see these results. MDMA-assisted group therapy, and the sample size is 18, so it's 3 cohort study, which would be 6 veterans per group. And most of the sort of basis of these studies, the MDMA studies specifically, are based on the MAPS protocol, which I think most people here are familiar with the 12 weeks, the dosing, integration, and preparatory. But Dr. Stauffer has another study, psilocybin enhanced psychotherapy for methamphetamine use disorder. So I believe that will be the first for psilocybin within the VA. So I'm very excited about that. And it's for veterans who are currently enrolled in an RRTP, which stands for Residential Rehabilitation Treatment Program. So they're already enrolled there. And there's going to be treatment as usual versus the psilocybin enhanced treatment. And then working my way down, the last on the left is Dr. Tricia Suppies. She's with the Palo Alto VA, and her study is not yet recruiting. All this information is on clinicaltrials.gov. So whether it's recruiting, not recruiting, the location, and who to contact is online. So Dr. Suppies in Palo Alto is looking at MDMA-assisted therapy versus cognitive processing therapy, or CPT, which is sort of the standard PTSD therapy treatment that the VA provides, in addition to others like prolonged exposure therapy. And then on the right-hand side, we've got Dr. Rachel Yehuda at the Bronx VA, and her study is looking at 2 versus 3 MDMA-assisted psychotherapy sessions in the treatment of PTSD. And then Dr. Leslie Moreland is at San Diego, and she has 2 studies. One is currently recruiting, and one is not yet recruiting. And recruiting meaning you can apply for eligibility and screening to enroll in the study. MDMA-assisted cognitive behavioral, it's a mouthful, cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy, CBCT. And another study was done by Dr. Ann Wagner out of Canada, and she spoke at the Oakland conference in 2017. At the conference, I'm sure some of us were there. The difference so this is, a lot of these studies have to be modified for the VA and for the government and for our IRBs. And the CBCT study at San Diego VA, the veteran, it's couples are going through the protocol together. And one has PTSD, and then the loved one or significant other does not have PTSD, but they're going through the process together. And usually both would get MDMA as part of this protocol, but being VA liability, I'm sure, was part of the decision, but only the veteran with PTSD is getting the MDMA. So it's slightly different than the previous CBCT study. And then the other study that's not yet recruiting, which is Dr. Moreland, is MDMA-assisted masked prolonged exposure for PTSD. I had to look up what masked PE is. So usually prolonged exposure, it's about 12 weeks, give or take, and then you're getting prolonged exposure therapy weekly. But when it's in a masked program, which is modified for an intensive outpatient program or sort of truncated, they're getting the PE either every day or every other day. So looking at MDMA in addition to that PE protocol. And then lastly, in the Los Angeles area, there's Dr. Stephanie Taylor and Stephen Martyr, and this is not yet recruiting also, but will be soon, hopefully. It's MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD, but is randomized and blinded with amphetamine. And I believe it's a larger sample size than some of the other ones. So a lot of these studies are sort of preliminary feasibility, safety, and preliminary effectiveness. And then the last part, doing good on time. So these are things I included for you to hear directly from leaders within the VA, sort of VA approved, and from their mouth, to save my job, I guess. I don't know. But this is coming directly from the VA. There's a podcast that was just released from the VA Undersecretary for Health, Dr. Elnahal, and it was looking at VA and psychedelics. So you can listen to that to get more information. And the last couple weeks, I included it. There's a hearing, a congressional hearing that you can look. I mean, if you like C-SPAN, it kind of is like C-SPAN, but it was the Veterans Affairs Committee, the Health Oversight Subcommittee, where there were VA representatives testifying about psychedelic research and the future of research. And they went on the record saying, Congress people were asking, if a veteran wants to know about psychedelics, can people who work at the VA talk about psychedelics? And they said yes. We can't of course, not recommending something that is not medicine or FDA approved, but just at least talking about risks. I heard that and I was very relieved because, I've been talking about this for years, but it is from an ethical standpoint, what are the risks? I think we should, be able to talk about that. Okay, and I'm almost out of time. But if you want to look up VA standpoints and more information, I've included that. And then clinicaltrials.gov if you're interested or know someone who might be interested in enrolling. So more to come. And then I will leave it to the Q&A. Thank you. Is my mic on?
I think it's okay.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much, Shannon. I'm curious, in your discussions with your colleagues from all these VA centers, what are some of the most inspiring things that you've seen in the work that you've been doing?
A lot of inspiring things. So I've been really pleasantly surprised at, we kind of have to, working with the VA, you have to listen to veterans. And there are a lot of people who work there for a reason. I was kind of sharing my beliefs, but I don't think I'm alone in really why I work there. I was listening to a podcast, probably a podcast people here have listened to, but someone said, vocation, the Latin sort of origin is vocare, like vocal, like to call, like it's a true calling. It doesn't have to be your job, but it's your calling. And when you meet people who really are there because it's, drives them, it's really powerful. So I think there are people within the VA, whether scientists, clinicians, or just veterans themselves who work as peer support specialists. It's really special. And then there are, I'll defer the specific things, but there's some really just the things that you read about in other studies, and I think everyone here knows about the power of psychedelics. Seeing that happening within the VA is amazing. Because we talk about set and setting, and then, doing a psychedelic in the setting of like a government facility, it's kind of weird, weird for me, weird for them, but it's going all right, so.
One of the things that I love about the SNAP lab at the Portland VA is, the folks they're working with are, they're in a residential program. So, their setting is a 3-minute walk from their bedroom, essentially. So I love that, safety component and also the community component. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about the sort of community that is the veterans, and what's your perception of how they're communicating with one another about these things?
Oh man, word of mouth, and because I think it when it's someone you trust and someone who we're humans and we have our in-group out-group type thing, which I can see the cogs spinning, and you never served and you're a civilian, but I trust you. And it's like, well, that's great, but it's been coming up a lot. And I think it's been documented in the media and a lot of journal articles about going to other countries and seeking this out and seeking out healing. And then that loses trust within the VA because I have to leave and, maybe I don't want to leave. And so I think a lot of it has been, sorry, what was the question? Yeah, the word of mouth is very powerful. And then amongst just VA clinicians, it's like, oh, they're asking me about these things and I don't know. So like word of mouth is getting around too. So then like people are being referred to me. So I'm really glad they went on the record to say like, you can talk about these things. Because sometimes, you just don't know with the federal situation.
Yeah. It's complicated. As a researcher who is consistently biting the hand that feeds me, I think Sue and I are in the same boat in this manner. It's a tricky situation that you're in, right? That there are a lot of guidelines you have to follow. You have to be extremely careful about how things are communicated, and there's just in general a lot of sensitivity. It's a high risk environment and rigorous. There's sort of speaking of sensitive subjects, a lot of our audience members are really interested to know if the VA has any ongoing studies or plans to do studies for women veterans, and in particular women veterans who might have some chronic sexual harassment trauma. I don't know a lot about that, but if you could speak a little bit, what is that dynamic like for women who serve in the military, and how can we address those needs?
So I hope that study will be coming. There's not one that I know of that's woman specific, but all the studies that are ongoing right now include women, but I do think there should be that's a subgroup of a subgroup. And there's a veteran actually told me about a documentary called The Invisible War, and it's specifically about military sexual trauma. And I recommend just watching it. It took me a little while to be ready to watch it because I mean, you know what it's going to be, but that also took, like, I'm committed. When a veteran told me, hey, this is my experience, I think you should watch this documentary, I'm going to watch it, I think, and then it did teach me a lot because, and I don't know if that's reflective of, it's hard to get into, I'm not a sociologist, but power dynamics and gender and who is able to feel more safe and who's not, and who's respected and who's not. And I think that kind of it's very much in your face when it comes to these hierarchical organizations. Yeah. So it is very real, and there's a lot of statistics that I don't know off the top of my head, but I would recommend The Invisible War. And I hope, and I will promote, and maybe even one day I could be involved, depending on what happens in the future, on a woman-specific. I think that definitely needs to be done for sure. Yeah.
Our audience members are bringing up another topic that tends to disproportionately affect women, which is domestic violence and the complex PTSD that results from domestic violence. Based on what you're learning in, the PTSD studies at the VA, can you speak to how those therapies might transfer over to those, complex PTSD cases?
So, one thing that the VA does well, so there are a lot of resources, and they do have intimate partner violence. Well, I'm pretty sure every hospital is required. Like, for better or worse, when you get a mandate from Congress, you have to do it. And sometimes that's great. Like, you can't discriminate, and it's like, okay, like, there's a law, you got to do it. And hey, you need IPV specialty care, and we got to do it. And then other times, it's, that can be a plus and a minus, like most things. I don't think it's good enough, but we do have IPV specialty care. But I still don't think, and we're also required to have women's health clinics. And this is my personal opinion, just me, I do think that the women's clinics tend to be, less staffed, like it does seem to, like kind of where you see everywhere else. It's not necessarily front and center. Mm-hmm. And I will, I guess, mention too, when you it can bring up emotion when you hear, government or veteran and you have your own experiences and then that's okay. But I've been very surprised working at the VA for however many years now. If you include residency, it's been over 10 years. That there's a statistically overrepresentation percentage-wise of LGBTQIA and marginalized communities. So there's actually, we actually see more within the VA. So whatever notion I had in my mind of what it was going to be, it wasn't that. And I was pleasantly surprised, and that's part of the reason I'm still there too. I'm from the South, so I feel like I can say this, but like F-150s and like guns and stuff. Maybe it's because I'm in California, but I don't see that. I don't see that at all. Like that was not. And we also, I think is a great thing, we're mandated to have healthcare specific. Our VA, I'm pretty sure we still have the designation, but anyway, plug for Loma Linda, we are one of 3 centers of excellence for transgender healthcare. Like we're required to have experts. And the cool thing about the VA too is you're all connected, so we can team stock each other. I know like anyone who works for the VA, like you've done it, like are they online? And like I've, like Rachel Yehuda, like we can find each other. And if you have a question, and we can outsource knowledge. So like other VAs who are like, well, I'm not sure what to do about gender confirmation, hormone therapy, and anyway. And I said that wrong. Anyway, sorry. I'm so nervous. Public speaking is terrible. This is like, this is terrible. This is so weird.
You're doing great. Well, what I'm hearing from you is that some of the benefits of working within the VA system is this natural network that already exists and is hyper-connected, much like the mycelial network. And that you might have,
Exactly, that's what I said.
You might have the opportunity to transmit your, findings and your knowledge and wisdom about everything that's happening in your trials with the rest of the system, so that they could benefit, these other, historically underserved communities, the women's clinics.
Yeah, get those women's studies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I know that substance misuse and substance use disorders impact a lot of veterans, and our audience is really curious to know if, the interface between substance treatment, the VA, do you think that there is resistance from the substance use or the substance treatment community against using psychedelics as a treatment for substance use disorders?
Wow, that's a really good question. And I worked on a substance treatment specialty team, and I do have board certification. I don't work with the specialty team anymore, but I find that, at least my personal experience, it can go either way. Sometimes they see the need, and they see the gray more so than not. Like harm reduction is actually a thing now. But then you've got the other people who are just never, abstinence sort of, that whole thing. So it can definitely go either way, but I don't think, and there's enough data, and I would like to think that people can update their opinions as information grows, and I have seen that. I've been very happy to see, hey, this appears to be helping substance use. It's interesting. So the pendulum has sometimes swung almost too much, where they're like, oh, we should be giving this, and I'm like, whoa. So it just depends on the person. But I don't think it's as big. And also we've seen the devastation of what's going on with overdoses. So I think that's also just forced people to open their minds.
Yeah. That's certainly something that I've noticed in, the cannabis field as well. Like 10, 15 years ago, the receptivity to harm reduction and using a psychoactive substance as a less harmful substance than these other, more dangerous things. That was a pretty radical idea at the time. And I think that, as our society is evolving and we're being personally confronted with the truly devastating effects of, things like opioids, that some of these more entrenched fear-based ideas, they're starting to loosen, and we're starting to have a little more compassion and kindness that also happens to align well with the evidence.
Yeah,
so, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.